Hello. Today we are going to do some file lookups. And these are going to be a little bit more advanced topics and a little bit more, maybe more pull you out of your comfort zone. But inevitably people want to bring things into a file. So I created this lookup file, a form, and we're going to run through it. And as you can see, the first thing that I want you to look at or put into your file is that using system IO, because that IO stands for in and out. And that's going to allow us to do all these things. Now, if we look at our form, it's pretty advanced. I should shrink it down a little bit, but it's really not as big as you would think. There's an exit button, which we know how to do. We have these little list boxes. We have text boxes. And we have an append button. And the append, if you don't know what that means, it means you add on to it. So when you go into a file, you can read everything that you want. But what if, let's say you write to a file? Well, what's going to happen? One of two things. You either have to overwrite the file, so in other words, delete everything in it and start over, or you can add to it. Adding to it is what append means. Append's just a fancy name for that. So let's go ahead and double click into append. But actually, before we do that, let's go and look at the setup. First off, we're going to do a string family name and this StreamReader, which is the input-output file grabber, or at least one of them offered to us by the C# libraries and the .NET libraries. So we're going to call it name file. Now, it doesn't need a very important name here. It probably should get something that makes sense. In this case, as you can see, we're looking at family names, so it's important in the way I named it was, names. Okay. Now you can go a host of different ways with that. But before I would go into that, let's first say that StreamReader is what reads from a file. StreamWriter is what's going to write to a file. They have specific pieces, functions, operations that they do. Okay, then I'm going to say name file here, file open text, and it's going to open up the whole file. And as you can see, I can do it one of two ways. I can give it the full extension. So here's the @ symbol, and then I can write everything out. But this assumes that it's here, and it isn't. Where is it? Well, you can use a relative path length as well. So in other words, this is the full absolute path length. We can look for it somewhere else. Now, if I go into my lookup file folder, I can go, let's see if let me bring it in here. There is lookup file, and I go lookup file, bin, debug, and sure enough, here are my executable in the bin debug section. And we are looking for names.txt, which is right here. So in this case, I could just say, look at the names.txt. In fact, that would be good because I have since moved it from this spot. So I could just write that. Now, if I hit start, it should work. And you see a bunch of names here. Okay, what is that doing? Well, that's opening up the names.txt file. So let's see what's in here. We'll see David, Diane, Rick, Julie, Adam, Dad. Sounds like a good family, right? So that has been opened and taken into the name.file. If we would, and in fact, let me show you real quick. If we'd have left this where this no longer exists and I hit start, it's going to get an error because it wants to open that text file, but it it can't find it. So it's going to go wrong at that point. Okay, so now it says while bang, and if you remember your bang or exclamation point, that means not. Well, name file not end of stream. So that means if you're not to the end of the file, keep doing it. And it's going to say family name is equal to name file. Where have we seen that before? Oh, well, that's this. So what C# and most programming languages don't want you to do is actually use the raw name of that text file, or any file for that matter. They want you to give it some nickname, and then we're going to refer to it by that nickname every time, so we don't have to do that names.txt each time. Because that can get into issues, especially when you think about what the period means in object-oriented programming and so forth. So this name file, which let's say is name.txt, is the nickname for names.txt. We're going to use this thing called readline, which reads, guess what? The entire line. And going back to our text file, you'll see that one of these lines is just David. The second line is Diane. So it's reading those as one gigantic string and putting it into the family name, which we declared up here. So that's a temporary variable. And actually, I should say temporary variable. It's a variable made for a temporary name, because each time we go through that while loop, the family name is going to change from David to Diane to Richard and so forth. Then, hopefully you've watched my videos before, we're going to add this to the items of names from file. So guess what that makes this? This is a list box. And if we click on this list box over here, names from file, it is. Terrible naming conventions, no camel casing whatsoever, but we're just gonna roll with it. Now it's going to do that over and over and over again until it reaches the last one, which would be Dad, right? And if we start it up, sure enough, Dad is the last one shown here. What does this do? Well, name file close. Well, this opens that file, this closes it, and again, it closes it by its nickname name file. This is important because you just don't want to leave these open. Computers nowadays will close these for you, hopefully, but if they dangle out there, you can really accidentally corrupt files. They can stay there. You might not be able to write to it when you open up something else, and it can be a real mess. So I would say, just out of common practice, always, if you open it, if you put a name file open.txt in here, always put a close in here. Now notice this is all within a try and a catch. So in other words, what happened when we did, let's say this, I'm going to do ... up. That means go up one in the directory. So if this is here, if we're at names.txt works here, then it's going to look in bin for this, and it can't find it. And so if we hit start, couldn't find that. So remember when we saw that error before, that is actually from the try catch, because we don't want this to just, hit a dead end and then we're stuck. So this allows us to keep going with it. In this case, I have no way of fixing that, but we could add another button that actually looks for it. And actually, that is one of the future lessons how to do later on, is how to open up file systems. So that works well, and I think we're on the road. So how would we write to a file? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's go ahead and mess this up, and I've already done it. Okay, I'm going to cheat here, and this is all that we have to do. So remember how we use StreamReader up here? Now we're going to use StreamWriter. It turns green or gray depending on your eyesight, based because of that systems.io library that we brought in. We're going to call it output. So just like we called this guy name file, StreamReader name file, we're going to call this guy output. Pretty simple, but instead of reading, we're going to be writing, and because of that, we want to assign it a place to write. So before we were opening text, now we're creating text. And let's go ahead and just call it output text. And if we just let it do its thing, we can do a temp line and put in test 2. Actually, maybe testing would be better just to see it. And it's because we just give it that basic name, all we have to do is look in and it should show up here in the names.txt. So I'm just going to run this, and actually before I do that, let's go through it one more time. So we're creating the string here, but down here we're putting the string into the file. And then out of cleanness, we're going to, if we open it, then we have to also close it. And notice, again, we're always going to be dealing with that nickname, not the actual output.txt full file name. Let's go ahead and run it. And the names.txt, oh, we never changed that back. All right. Messed with that for a second, so let's not do that. Let's do this. And it should work. And then if we exit out of that, look at this. This output.txt shows up. We double click in it, and there's testing. And let me make this a little bit larger. There's no reason to be so small there. Testing. Now, what happens if we wanted to put in all those names, right? Why not just do another while loop? Let's get rid of the testing. And we are going to circle through the right line here. So we don't want to close multiple times because you can't close something that's not open, right? So we want to make sure we do that. And we are going to do a while. And then in this case, we're going to give it names from file and we should probably set up a variable here. So while I is less than the items count. So see how we did items add? Now we're just telling it count how many there are. But we should say that I equals, int I equals 0. I is less than that, and of course we're going to have to increment I plus plus here, just like our regular I loops, except I forgot to put the curly brackets in. So let's do that now. And look at that auto one has done it. And what is temp line? Well, we're going to say that temp line is equal to, see if you can figure this out. We're going to look in the list box. So let's do names from file dot items dot, and this is where it gets a little tricky, is you have to do I, which we're going to explain to you later, and then set it to a string, because believe it or not, it is not necessarily in string format. Oops, and I put the no, I need a capital T here. Okay. So now let's go ahead and try it again. And it automatically ran. We'll probably bring this wonderful form back later, but right now I just want to get you guys out of this video and to the next. So I'm going to go look in here, and now when I do the output, there you go, David, Diane, Rick, Julie, Adam, and Dad. And now you have it. You have everything written to the list box and to the output file. So the next and maybe final question that we might ask is, how do we actually add to the file as opposed to writing over every file? Because right now that's what we're doing. We're creating and writing over file, and it becomes a very simple piece. All we have to do is type in append text to our piece instead of create text, and now it's going to add this to the end of our file. So let's go ahead and push play one more time. We get the names here, and I'm going to go into my debug file and look at my output, and notice here we get a double. In fact, I ran it 3 times by accident, so I end up getting it added to that file twice. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Whatever you want to append, you can append. If you want to start from scratch, just hit the create text.